The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to More University's Webinar Wednesday segment. I'm Ajay Mehra with More Financial. We are joined today by a very special guest, Mr. Branden Lowder, with the Echo team out of Keller Williams. Right, Branden?
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. Well, I want to do a short intro to the topic today, guys, because it kind of came up spur of the moment, and much as those of you that have joined on, again, I see a lot of similar names that are with us. Thank you guys so much for always being so steadfast with joining us on our webinars. We really appreciate it. I see 3 or 4 new names, actually, so welcome. Thank you guys for taking the time to join us, too. We get asked from time to time to do educational things outside of the office where we're guest speaking at events and whatnot, and that's actually how Branden and I came to meet each other. We were sharing a panel out at a real estate investment club out in the South Bay, Lisa Hagler's club, actually, for any of you guys that have been out there. We've been a longtime sponsor of the club, and it's also been very, very good to us. But wanted to make sure that we, had the opportunity to share with you guys an important question that got asked of the panelists that night, and mainly spurred up because of Branden being on that panel and you being so good at what you do. Him and I actually talked about it after and said, hey, this would be a fantastic topic. We've got to share this with our webinar cast. So long story short, somebody reached out in the audience and said, how do I find a good realtor? And it was funny because they kind of asked a question to both you and I, Branden, and I immediately defaulted. I looked at Branden and said, this is right up your alley because, I mean, aside from the accolades that you have and the number of cycles you've been through, but the fact that you really just truly do know your stuff. And it was funny because, we've been asked that at other settings and in other situations, and I thought, what a great thing to do is to have somebody who actually is fantastic at what they do come join us on this panel and share with you guys and give you insight from somebody who's been interviewed and can give you the tips on how to interview and find a good realtor so that hopefully you can take that knowledge and that education going forward and screen realtors that you may work with, or hopefully, better yet, just even call Branden directly and work with him and his team. But if you choose a different market that may be outside his segment, you can take the principles we're going to discuss today and push it forward. So Branden, if you would, can you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you focus on?
Sure, I appreciate that very much, AJ, and thanks for having me on your program today. And you're right, it was a great little panel that we were on, big audience, lots of good questions, very diverse panel, which makes for good topics and conversation. I've been in real estate for 23 years now. I started in Arizona, and pretty diverse market, in the early 90s, especially where I was from. So not just general real estate, but new home construction and land development. But back then, we did a lot of creative things too. We did a lot of seller financing and 1031 exchanges, and so I moved to Southern California about 8 years ago, and partnered up with my wife, Tammy, and we have a great team right now over at Keller Williams called Team Echo Real Estate. Specialize in the investment side of it, predominantly been doing flip and renovation properties for the last few years, and I know we joked about this on the panel, AJ. I don't typically like to use the word flip. I think it has a negative connotation.
That's right. I think your exact words were "flipper is a dolphin." And I remember.
Flipper is a dolphin. Well, it's interesting, and most investors might not recognize this, but when their house goes back on the market after it's been, renovated or rehabbed, that's a pretty common question that a buyer asks when they come through. They actually ask if it's a flip. There's right out of the gate, and if you answer yes, they almost brush it off a little bit. They get a little concerned look on their face. So, if anything I could recommend would be, let's change our language a little bit and be proud of what we do. And renovation and rehab is what we do, right?
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you on that. And, it's funny, just kind of going off what you said, it's something I've heard at random. I don't know, maybe it was a couple months back. I was having a conversation with a realtor out in Orange County, and they mentioned something to me. I asked them, I said, hey, do you work with people, or will you take a listing on a property that's been rehabbed? And it was the first time I'd ever heard an agent tell me, no, I don't like to take those types of listings. And it really didn't make any sense to me. I didn't understand it at first. When I first started, I thought, man, maybe this agent's just nuts. I don't get what they're talking about. And I heard it again in a couple different settings, and I realized that you're absolutely right. That word flip and the concept of a flip started getting this really deep negative connotation. From what I started taking notice of was probably back towards like the end of last year going into the beginning of this year because of the type of products that were being produced. And the agents were coming at us saying, hey, I don't, at the end of the day, you're putting your stamp on it, your name on it. When you're given something to sell and you're going out there and you're listing this property, you're essentially vouching for it in some way, right? And
yeah, you typically are, for sure.
Yeah, so they started coming back saying, I don't want to put my name on a product that I don't believe in. And fair enough, that actually made a lot of sense to me. They said, if I don't think the property's done well or put together well, I definitely don't want to be going around toting the fact that I stand behind this product or even this client, for that matter.
And I'll go one step further with that, AJ. Yeah, I'll go one step further. The right agents who truly understand the process, it's not even necessarily a reputation thing that goes with it. It's a time-consuming process as the market's changed and buyers are a little more savvy and do a little more research. Their expectation of the product is different, whereas 4 years ago it was really easy to just put the lipstick on the pig and nobody cared. Now they're paying attention to more things, especially when it comes to inspections. As a listing agent, it creates more work, not just liability and reputation.
And that was one of the things, Branden, when we were on that panel that really stuck out to me, man, when you were talking. It floored me because it's something I always believe in, and it's something that we talk to our sales guys. You started telling the audience a little bit about the concept of value and what buyers out there value now as opposed to what they valued then, and how that's totally different. And agents that they may necessarily choose or elect to work with going forward may not understand that concept of perceived value in a buyer's eyes, right?
That is correct. Yeah. And we've gotten to the point with investors ourselves where we've made the decision to no longer represent them or work with them just merely because of the quality or lack thereof of quality or participation, and it puts a lot of pressure on our team and our reputation. And as a real estate agent, long term, you expect referral business. I mean, at the end of the day, that's our reputation is important. And when you have a not so pleasant transaction, I mean, people they have a tendency to remember the negatives more than the positives. So
as always,
it can be painful. And for a seller and investor, it's a little easier for them because they're not speaking directly with a buyer, and they're not they're really not there and having to say so much. So it's very important that the right agent is representing the right way and can be a buffer in certain situations, or more importantly, market the property the right way and make sure that the buyer is completely aware of the things that were done. Full disclosure is usually the best policy when it comes to that.
Yep, absolutely. And guys, for all of you that are listening in too and chiming in, as we get into the meat of this one, I want to make sure that you guys always feel free to type in your questions. You can type them in; they'll pop up on our screen, and Branden and I will try to answer them live as we're going. So if anything pops in your head while you're listening to us, or if we say something that kind of sticks out, please make sure to type in a question, and we'll jump on it for you as quick as we can. And Branden, now I think to make things fair, we've looked at it and said, hey, from the realtor's eyes, from your eyes, essentially. It's important that a client give you a product that you stand behind and that you feel good about. Now let's flip it over a little bit. Let's say somebody does everything right, okay? They do a fantastic job, they get the property going, and now they're out to find an agent, okay? One of the main that we got hit on that one time was, well, if I'm going to go meet an agent or I'm going to go talk to him, what are some things I should ask him? You've been in that hot seat. When you're being screened, or you're probably at the level now where people don't need to screen you, but if you can think back, way back to when you were getting screened, what were some of the questions, or even on that flip side, what would you advise are some of the major questions people should be asking these realtors when they're sitting down with them for the first time to essentially go out and get them the best possible, sale value they can for this project they just went to hell and back to put together?
Sure. Yeah. No. And that's a loaded question. So let me preface it by just giving a quick overview of what I've seen happen over the last 23 years, and it's as simply as this. It's 15 plus years ago, maybe actually even 13 plus years ago, the mindset of a buyer and a seller was they sought out either through referrals, people that they knew, or they were reading advertising. They didn't have access to information that they do today. They had to seek a real estate agent out because they had the book, the MLS book, and it had all the information. So we had this perceived value a long time ago, right? And as it's evolved with technology, believe it or not, real estate agents aren't necessarily on the forefront of a thought of someone buying or selling. They typically go to the internet. So the process has completely changed. So right out of the gate, if an investor doesn't even understand what the buyers do and their behaviors to go through the process, then that puts them in a tougher position. And as the market's changed, which to me the market is becoming more normal, I think for the last 10 years pretty easily, it's been a different market in the sense that between supply and demand and the process, people just walked in and bought, and it's a little different now. It's slowing down. People are taking their time, and so the value proposition I think is even bigger. So if you were to Google, as an example, AJ, Google, hey, what questions can I mean, you can do this. You Google it, Bing it, what questions should I be asking my real estate agent? You'd be surprised at the standard canned questions that people ask. So I know you wanted me to bring a little more meat to this. So
well,
if you're
I will
out there,
say, though, I want to jump in there real quick. That's actually really powerful what you just said. For those of you guys that are listening, for those of you that have asked that question, please don't forget that the internet is extremely, extremely powerful now, and it gets totally overlooked in its most simplistic fashion that Branden just kind of touched on. You can, in fact, to better prepare yourself, guys, you can Google stuff. You can literally put something as simple as questions to ask my realtor, and it'll pop up. So thank you for highlighting that, Branden, because that is extremely important. But I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, no, and it's just intelligence gathering, and if you're curious about what buyers and trends are happening, obviously you can Google those things as well. But the short and sweet of it, really, I think at the end of the day, the first question anybody should ask is the level of experience or the background that real estate agent has. So and sometimes just that question of experience, I want to expand, Jay, because to be fair, there are a lot of qualified, intelligent, hardworking individuals who have had a previous, career that are now in real estate. So just because they've had the real estate license for a year or two doesn't necessarily mean they're not qualified to be the right person. So I wanted to clarify that across the board. I think, there's more to the real estate experience in the background. So, the question would be, what is your real estate experience and background? And if it's less than a couple of years, I think the follow-up question to that would be, what did you do in your prior life? I think those things are important, and people that are very geared towards customer service or those industries, I think they qualify as better agents because that trickles down to the communication and the other things that we expect. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I've had conversations, believe me, I won't even say conversations, guys. I'll be completely fair. I've had heated arguments with realtors over the phone that are about to list a property for a client of ours that we've had the loan on, we gave it to them, and the client felt so strong about the disconnect, I guess I should say, that the agent had on maybe what the listing price should be, and I've gotten heated arguments with them about where in God's name they're coming up with their listing price, and that's with people that have been in the industry 20 years. And I mean, yeah, completely. So you really touched on an awesome word there. You said, qualified. So what are you looking at when you're qualifying these guys?
So, besides experience and background, I think the second question I would recommend people ask is have the agent explain as accurately as possible what the buying and selling process is from start to finish. I think on the surface, people look at real estate. I think on the surface, and I talk about this when I teach, the English language has, a gazillion words, and they can all be used in different ways. And I think personally, AJ, I think everybody I meet, and here's the key word, is interested in real estate. Mm-hmm. And there's more HGTV, there's more internet access. I mean, it's just real estate, especially because of the crash and tying it into the stock market, it's just more exposure. So again, I think everybody's interested in real estate, and I think there's a significant difference between someone's interest and someone who actually wants to be involved in real estate.
Right.
And I think the same is true with a real estate agent. If it's not their full-time job, they're just part-timing it, or they heard through the grapevine that, I could make a couple $100,000 a year selling $3 million properties, and
Right.
they don't really have the same intention of getting in real estate as the professionals who work full time and do what we do. So if I were to ask a real estate agent, hey, could you tell me not just what the next steps would be, but what do we need to do, and what is the process and time frame to get it closed, you'd probably be floored that more than half of them couldn't even answer that question. So, and that's pretty scary, because it's not about the value or what you're going to write the offer at. It's the other strategies to get the deal, and then it's what happens after you get the deal. It's all the inspections and renegotiating, and people that might need to move out, or dealing with a bank, and there's a lot of moving parts in a real estate transaction.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree.
So I think the third question would be, and you touched on this earlier, AJ, and I think that is a huge challenge for most people, is could you please explain the factors you use to determine a property value and how you came to your conclusion? I think
Right.
It's just a great question. So share with me what information you use, right? Oh, Zillow said, right? Maybe not.
Right.
What are the sources, and then what conclusion are you coming to? And we see this all the time. Our team, we probably write 35 to 45 offers a week, and it's a very common theme on our team to truly identify the right comps to at least justify some value range. So I think that's a great question to ask. Where are you getting your facts?
Right.
I think the fourth good question would be, ask somebody what their business model is. Why are you in real estate? Like, what is your intention?
That's
If
huge.
money is the first thing that comes out, I think their priorities are messed up. Because if you do a good service and you do what you're supposed to do in real estate, the money comes. So, I think that's a big one. And I think one of the last questions, AJ, that I would ask anyone just to hear in their own words would be something like, why should I hire you over someone else? And really hear what their value proposition is. What is it that you bring to the table? Because if you say you're good with market knowledge, well, any real estate agent can do that. As a matter of fact, we train them to say that. So that's, to me, that's a canned answer,
Right.
So those are good ones. And one other I just thought of too that I think is really important is ask them to define, describe, or name a recent change, either in the industry, the market, rules, regulations, or laws that could affect their buying or selling decision.
Yep.
And
That's a
just
great
see how up to date they are in the market,
Yep. And see, what I love about what you kind of covered in those questions, and for those of you that are listening to, it's great, really, what Branden said is that you can't, whatever, it's cliche, you can't judge it by its cover, i.e., don't look at an agent based on how many years they've been in the industry to determine whether you want to choose them as the individual to sell your property or not. But really, you got to test and qualify their actual knowledge of what's happening, because it isn't 2010 or 2011 or 2012 anymore where you pop it on MLS and it flies. In fact, as a lender, to the flip side of that, I guess we used to get shocked. It doesn't shock me now when somebody gets I'll just call it an uneducated agent or disconnected agent that will list a property, and if there's not an offer on it in the first week, the client panics and they start doing price drops. And that's just not the way to go about it. Branden, you touched on in the beginning that there's, the market's returning to normalcy and a normal pace, and 7 days on market is not normal. That's not the normal pace of things. So, when not advised right, if somebody doesn't have 10 days on market and they speak to, let's just call it a less than credible agent, that agent's going to look at them, and I've heard it on conference calls, and say, what's that canned answer, Brandon? Oh, the price is a great equalizer. Looks like we got to do a drop.
Right.
And from a lender's point of view, I tell clients that all the time. For those of you that have been on other webinars, have heard me say this a million times. That is literally like slitting your wrists in a Shark Tank. You just don't do that. And having the right agent on your side that understands markets, not just this present market, but has been through multiple cycles and knows how the market works, and can look to you and say, like Brandon just said, that, hey, don't panic because this is normal. That's so imperative. And that, those are the things that you want to be cognizant of when you're looking at an agent. So Brandon, thank you for answering that, because again, guys, for those of you that asked that question too on that panel, hopefully you're listening to this webinar too. Remember, it's not just interviewing the realtor, but really qualifying them and qualifying their knowledge base. So that was perfect to touch on. So Brandon, let's dumb it down even further, because I've been asked this one. What's, in your eyes, what separates a good agent and a bad agent? Because that's totally subjective, right? There's another.
Yeah, that's another good question.
These are my popular demand of our listeners, man. So you're gonna have to forgive me, but they want to get right at your jugular, okay?
Yeah. When do we get to the multiple choice questions? That's what I want. AJ, I think, I've taught a lot of classes, and I've always tried to find ways to get the students or the audience to find a way to relate to whatever the subject matter is. And over time, I've come up with a great analogy, and maybe people can resonate with this or not, but and it's kind of funny in a way, but I call it speed dating. And really, LA is a little fast paced, and people have high expectations, and some people have hidden agendas, and we've had a very busy market. And so 5 years ago, it was a lot easier to speed date because you could get in and out of the relationship and then you're done. Well, now it's a little more important to have really a relationship. And so when we're talking about what's separating good from bad, I really think it's the overall relationship. And it is, if I were your agent and you were my client, I really would be having a conversation like, hey, AJ, it sounds like we have a lot of work to do together, and I'm looking forward to that. Reality is, I need to make sure you want to work with me and my team, and at the same time, believe it or not, we need to make sure we want to work with you. And before we make any commitments about going forward, I think we just need to have some general conversation about, some of your goals, what is it you're trying to accomplish, and when it comes to real estate, we'll talk about, exit strategies and maybe profit and market values, and we'll have those conversations, because if I really get the feeling that we're not on the same page, I think it's going to be a tough relationship. So for me, it's a good agent will slow things down and have good quality conversation so that there's some level of connection so that both parties benefit. I think a bad agent is someone who is very uncommunicative, who rushes through things, who here's a great example. We joke about this too. What are interest rates today? And you'd be surprised. Most people give the standard 30-year fixed rate, and they're probably wrong. It's whatever they say, 3 7/8 or 4 1/4, whatever. It's the same thing with value. Value is typically a range, and that's a better conversation. So if someone were to ask me, hey, what do you think my house is worth? And I said $399, that I just planted a seed, and you're going to remember that number. But if I told you it's going to be between $380 and $420, and it sells for $403, you don't hold it against me. You know what I'm saying? So I think just in general conversation, if you have conversation and not so much hypothetical stuff, I think you can really, really out of the gate separate who's going to be good from bad. But again, going through the speed, dating analogy, once you start having a couple more dates, you start finding out, are they late? Do they return my calls? Did they pay for dinner? And I know that's a goofy analogy, but I think there's nothing worse than a client making a commitment to a real estate agent because the first date it sounded good, so you made the commitment, you signed the listing agreement, and then the agent goes away, or they're too busy, or they got another job, or they just really maybe didn't understand what they were doing. And those are really bad things to happen after you've made the commitment to do business together.
Oh yeah, especially when they just kind of take it, stick it on MLS, and that's the last that is done of it. And it's
Right.
funny that you said speed dating and you said it's a goofy analogy. For those of you that are on this webinar series with us, you've heard me use a goofy analogy that, man, it's like a perfect time to what you say. I say all the time that, whatever contract you enter into, it's a mini marriage. It really is.
Right.
You guys are in that little mini marriage with each other. And, from our standpoint, with all the conversations we've had with realtors, I've come to find out, and you touched on it when you started talking about it too, it's those agents that say we as opposed to you. When they're talking to their client, they're really speaking about it. Everything that they speak about is we, because they genuinely feel like they are in it with you. They understand that this contract, this listing contract they've entered into with you, is a mini marriage, and you guys are in it together, as opposed to agents that will say, well, hey, you should probably think about doing this, or maybe you want to do that. Right on that front conversation, guys, and this even goes back to when you sit down with them. Let's say you're nearing your property to be completed or what have you. If we're talking about a renovation project or whatever, maybe you're looking to sell a property, and you actually sit down and you meet with them, like Brendan's saying, you have a little mini date, right? A speed date. You're gonna meet with them, and now that you're armed with some questions that we've given you guys and some tactics, you're going to go and you're going to employ that. And you're going to sit down with them, really pay attention to how they talk about the property, how they talk to you about this listing. Is it, what do you want to get out of it? What are you trying to do? Or is it, well, here's what we should set aside to do? And like Branden, you innately said that. You said, we've got a lot to talk about. And those are things you can pick apart right away. It's those little word choices as to how they view you, or you both together in this little mini marriage. And like you said, how time's going to get valued. You probably go through it too, where you need to reach a client and they don't return your calls. They're more inactive, or you're far more active than they are, right?
Oh yeah, that happens as well, or they're not receptive to your opinion. That's another challenge we have with what we call the investor ego. And I get it. I respect it. It's your business, and you're trying to be profitable. But to your point, if you're going to share in a relationship, a great qualifier is to allow the other party to play devil's advocate or even debate with you a little bit, and collaborate. Really, at the end of the day, to collaborate to make sure everybody's on the same page about the choices that they're going to make, for the best possible outcome. That's what we're trying to do.
Well, I got to ask you an off-the-cuff question here, and for those of you guys that are listening, save this one, because we all look at things from our own eyes, and it's imperative that you understand what the other person, for you guys that are investors or clients that are going to be hiring an agent, that you're aware of what the person you're going to hire to list your property is looking at. Branden, what's your biggest pet peeve with working with investors, if you had to pick one?
If I had to pick one,
yep.
I would say, well, that's a tough one too. I would say my biggest, yeah, it is. I would say my biggest pet peeve is that they ultimately, as a listing agent, they ultimately put a lot of pressure and liability on us, and it typically stems around, here's a typical conversation. Before we bought the property, we agreed that the ARV would be 500. So these are our recommendations, but at the end of the day, the investor made the choice to buy the property and rehab the property, and for whatever reasons, because of what happened during the process, holding time extended, whatever, I can go on a laundry list of those, that the expectation now for return is that the property needs to be put on the market for 540.
Right.
So now the pressure is put on us because of mistakes that were made either on the buying side or the renovation side or all of that. And I think that is probably the biggest thing for us, because it puts us in a position of failure if we're not collaborating and really having heart-to-heart conversations about what's the best deal. So, and as the market's changing, there's blood in the water right now with buyers. Mm-hmm. And they'll watch. And it doesn't matter if it's a $1,000 price reduction or a $10,000 price reduction. They know that the leverage is on their side when you start reducing your price.
Right.
So I think, AJ, my biggest challenge is that I think that the investor on those scenarios, makes up their mind what they need to do without really collaborating and really being as smart as possible about, the exit.
And you know what? I'm glad you said that, because for you guys that are listening, it's imperative that you understand how important it is to collaborate with your agent, because, well, again, and then, from the client side, they're looking at it going, well, I need to have a good agent first. Fair enough. We get that kind of tie together. But it kind of goes back to something that I've always talked about with with people that are looking to buy property, and I want to ask your opinion on it too. Do you think it's important for clients to use the same agent that sold them the property to relist it once they're done?
Not unless they've done what I've been recommending, to sit down and actually have 20, 30-minute conversation about their experience. I think that as supply and numbers get constrained for us, the market gets tighter.
Mm-hmm.
The common rule of thumb is that I'm going to get the deal by working directly with the listing agent, which is not entirely accurate.
Right.
And the expectation that the listing agent has at that point to get the relist back. So, for you investors that are playing that game, I respect what you have to do, or what you feel you have to do to get the deal. But at the same time, you're in this to make money and have the best possible outcome. And just because that particular agent got you the deal doesn't mean they're the best to sell it. So, I think it's okay. I think it's okay to say to that person, I appreciate the opportunity. You're making a double commission here, but we need to sit down and talk about the exit strategy before we make that commitment.
And that's, see, again, guys, it's great that you got to hear Branden say that, because that is what an experienced agent will say. And I'm glad you guys got to hear it on our webinar today, because it just made you aware of it right then and there, as to these are some of the things you should expect to hear when you're speaking to somebody that is qualified, that knows what they're doing. And if you don't hear that, if they're not speaking to you in that way, you should be cautious. You need to dig deeper, and you need to ask the right questions. And if you're unsure, you can always call us, and we can chat it out with you and role play the interaction and get you better equipped, or better yet, you would just call Branden and his team, and they would help you out on it. But have your, don't put the cart in front of the horse when you're out there. Don't go out and find a property, make all the decisions you want to make on it, and then go hire a realtor and say, hey, now go sell my vision, because they weren't a part of your vision from the get-go. And you're asking them to do something that only you can see. And I like that you said that, Branden. It's good to be fair on both sides, is that, you are setting them up for failure, so you can't do that either. You have to be fair and equal in the relationship. So
right, and I understand the investor's perspective. There's this sense of urgency to get your foot in the door and get the deal before somebody else does. I mean, that's a very natural, feeling when we're trying to buy property, especially, if it's a popular property that's potentially going to have multiple offers. And I understand that. I guess what I'm saying from experience, especially the last 6 months, is I don't know that you necessarily really need to do that. You really need a partner in assessing the true opportunity rather than the urgency to just spend the money.
Absolutely. That's so crucial and so important. So let me ask you this, Branden. Pricing a property in today's market, because I see different strategies all the time, right? I think maybe 2 years ago it was really sellers were dictating value. And this comes back to what you and I were talking about value, right? And now, from what I'm seeing, is it's really the buyers, in my view at least, in my opinion, the buyers are dictating the comps now. It's not the sellers, right?
I think it's a little of both, and I don't know. There are quite a few times where, even though the seller would put the property on the market for X, the buyers, to me, a little bit, AJ, were driving the value. So there were definitely times and pockets where things were selling above list price. And we talked about this on the panel. I know you remember we a value at the end of the day is really up to the buyer, right. And you can't really make the determination of whether values are going up or down. As an example, if it's not even priced right to begin with.
Right. No, you're totally right.
Right. I mean, so that's kind of a little bit of what we're battling, and I still find a majority of agents today, they don't even understand the difference between comps and condition and size and bedroom count and all these other goofball things. They really don't even know how to bracket accordingly. And obviously that puts things in a not so favorable thing for most investors. And then we call it speculative, right? We're not using the right comps, and we need to hit a certain price point where now we're rolling the dice. Can we get it? Can we get it? And so I think there has to be a triangulation of determining, you know, a market value for a property. And you kind of hit a little bit on the second bullet point there with the demographics, because you know, LA is so vast, and then we have so many different price points, and it's so diverse. So it can be very macro, and you know, there are areas that are still going through gentrification and growth, where you still see high demand and low supply, and you can retain a certain level of value. And then now we're maybe battling appraisal, but you know, I think we've hit a plateau for a majority of the pockets. I really do, as far as value goes. So I see the pendulum going to swing here in the next 6 months. Personally, there's going to be more properties on the market. I think, you know, the properties that we would like to acquire as investors, I see those prices coming down, but I don't really see the price of a renovated home coming down. I think they will continue to hold value or increase, you know. So I'm not too worried about that. But I'm telling you, if you really don't know the pocket, and you don't know the buyer, and you don't know the expectation, I think that's where you can do more harm than good. And I know for the most part, our audience understands the difference of, you know, appointments as an example. You don't appoint a house in Silver Lake the same way you would in Compton. I mean, I think we're all kind of on the same page there. Mm-hmm. But to me, that's old school. That's old news. You know, quality of appointments and colors, all that needs to start changing again. It's already stale. People using the same colors and trims and that kind of stuff. And it's time to step up and start offering things that are a little more unique. So that's my first advice. That's, if you want to pull the highest value you can, you have to offer uniqueness. You know, if it's all cookie cutter, then everybody's going to kill you with the square footage price. So we don't want to do that, right? I think that there are a gazillion floor plans out in the LA basin that to get the value, it's not just about the cosmetic stuff. I think it's about functionality now. I think it's about really understanding, you know, maybe you got to knock a couple walls out or move around to open it up, or do something creative. It might cost you more, yes, but you'll get the return out of it because the demand is there. You know, so I think it's just really understanding it, and that's why we like what we do on our team, because we collaborate start to finish. And you know, we've had listings all over LA and open houses all over LA, and we hear it day in and day out. Every weekend we regroup as a team and hear the feedback from the people walking through. And you know, it's not a guessing game when we're involved. We really walk through the whole process. So a recommendation is really know the pocket and the buyers that are buying in that pocket possibly before you start renovating, because I think that dictates, you know, what you ultimately are going to get for the property. You know, we can guess, right? I mean, we can run comps and do all of that, but I think the collaboration, AJ, is missing, and I think that needs to step up a little bit more.
Yeah, it's got to come back so much more. You're totally right. So, you know, again, I say this after every slide because, Branden, you really do just nail it every time, man. But I hope that you guys were listening to that, because that, you know, that was an answer of somebody who truly, genuinely understands how to price a property in the market, and that is that there is no right or wrong way. There is no, you know, price it this way, price it that way. It is it's directly derived from what the demographics and the actual perception of value in that certain marketplace, that small pocket. And if you're in LA, I mean, hell, man, we know how small that is. That could be like the difference between one block. It can be completely different than the other. And not knowing that, picking an agent or not being able to have an agent explain that to you when you're sitting down with them can hurt you.
Right.
Can really come back to hurt you, because if, you know, like you said, stale color, stale palette, stale this, if they're going into a certain pocket or an area that is colorful or likes, you know, risque, modern chic, and they do a very traditional rehab,
Right.
they're they're not going to get the ROI they're looking for. And now they've handed this product to you guys as agents and said, now go get me top dollar for it, because there's a comp, which, like you touched on, most people, I guess, have defined comp as house that sold down the street. Regardless of
Right.
square footage, bedroom, bathroom, just there's a house that sold down the street, there's a comp. They forget that comp actually stands for comparable, guys, and that's not just comparable in square footage and bedroom, bathroom count. It's comparable in appeal. It's comparable in layout. It's comparable in functionality. There's
Right.
so many pieces that go into that. So
Sure.
when pricing a property, and then, I think we got asked that night, Brandon, we were on that panel, and somebody said, well, how are you accurately pricing stuff? Are you pricing high? I hear stuff, right, where people say, oh, well, we price high and price drop, or I price it really low to get a bid war going.
Multiple. Right. And you have to be really cautious of that too, AJ, because again, we're sitting these open houses and we're getting the feedback. And right now, half the buyers that walk through the door, it's one of the first questions they ask is how many offers you have, because they don't want to play the bidding war game. So
right.
that's over with as far as I'm concerned. You have to price to sell in 30 days. That's just the market we're at. And, you can't price it for 180 days. It kills your holding costs and your profit if you price it that way. So, the market to me is more lateral, and that's a good thing, because the confidence of the people who've been sitting on the fence are there now, and that's good for all of us as far as I'm concerned. We're always going to find properties that are overpriced, and if you're patient enough, we can negotiate the price we need it to be down, because I love renovation. I love it. I don't see that market ever going away, ever. You can drive down any street in LA and you find a house that needs work. So, and the beauty of it is the buyer demand is for a turnkey house. Like, it's the perfect marriage. If you just kind of listen to what buyer demands are, man, you can be really profitable. So,
well, listen. That's the thing, right? And you're right. Most clients are emotional, and in some cases I laugh with them. I say, I need to be the needle to your balloon, and I'm going to tell you stop being optimistic. But you said something there that, for you guys that are investors and rehabbers out there, so crucial to listen to if you're new, especially getting out there and getting started on your project. Brandon said, you've got a price to sell in 30 days. And so when you guys are looking at a project, and for me as a lender, I'll give you my experience. We have clients that will come in and say, hey, I'm going to buy this house, and the after repair value is going to be X. And I say to them, you also said as well, Brandon, earlier, it's speculative, right? We're kind of betting on a futures bet. Anything can happen and change, provided you do everything perfect and the stars align. Great. But what you should be asking on every project, you guys, and when you're doing your numbers as an investor as to whether or not this project will work well for you, don't use a comp. Don't use, what the agent is effectively telling you is the highest you can get for it. Ask your agent, what do I need to price this at to sell it in 30 days? What's moving? And take that number. And if using that number put into your calculations shows you to have a profitable project, okay, great, because anything after that, guys, if you get something above that, this again comes down to you understanding as an investor what you're getting into on the front side. Brandon touched on it before. He said, hey, listen, what happens is sometimes a project will run late. If you've ever had a project go exactly to the T that your contractor said time-wise it would happen, I'm going to tell you right now, you're lying to yourself. It's impossible. There's always things that come up, and it may delay a day, a week, whatever. But then you can't just have to inflate the price to offset a cost or something like that. You really have to know it going in, and if you're prepared going in, you make the job for the agent on the outside, in tandem with what your goals are. Like Brandon said, if you guys are in a meeting of the minds, you're going to work well together that way. So make sure to ask that question too, and if an agent can't really tell you that, or you have to trust but verify on your own as well, use those numbers. So thanks, Brandon. I appreciate you saying that. And I guess, has a client gone against your recommendations? I'd love to know that.
Well, I would say yeah all the time, because there's always a budget involved, and again, a collaborative team talks about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you just talk about all of the things. And I find it time and time again with some of the investors we work with, while we're discussing what we should do to the property, I find themselves moving into it still. and there should be no emotion. There should be. It's not what you think necessarily it should or shouldn't. It really is, where's the property located and what are the buyer expectations? I mean, that's how we should look at every property. So, to answer your question, yes, they do it all the time, and you win some and you lose some. I've got 2 properties that took longer to sell because we decided to save $1,000 on a couple important features that we felt would have helped. And because we didn't do that, of course, we spend the time now when you open houses with potential buyers with them asking the question, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that? And it's kind of embarrassing. It's a tough question to answer to someone who wants to spend $900,000 on a house. Mm-hmm. I mean the results will vary depending on the recommendation, but I also respect and I also understand that there is a budget, and again, that's why you collaborate. Is what if you don't do this? What could potentially be the result? Having those conversations, I think, is huge. I think what people are not used to here, AJ, and again, where I think we have a huge value proposition. All my years and experience in selling new homes, like I get how to upsell. I get how to overcome and do those things where here we're not used to that. And I don't think investors are used to that either. Even on the buy and hold side, they'll look at, existing rents and the condition of the property is not so well, and they'll go, well, the numbers don't make sense, without really looking at the opportunity that, well, if you spend $40,000 on it and you can increase the rent accordingly because of the upgrades and the features, explain to me how you're not getting that return. I love having those conversations.
Right.
So, to me, there's opportunity in every property. It's just really understanding truly what those are and making sure you get some return for it. I mean, there's things that you have to do to a property that are a given, that the expectation of return is there no matter what, which could be the flooring or the paint or whatever, right? But what if you did add AC, or what if you did add a bathroom? Is the expense there? Absolutely. Nobody's questioning that, but the return can be significantly different. And so the question becomes, if I spend $2,000 here and I can get $5,000 to $10,000 out of it on the exit side, why would I not want to do that? Those are the challenges that I usually run across.
So do you usually walk a property when let's say a client finds a good a renovation project, and they go out there with a contract to get a bid? Do you walk it? Do you advise them, have their agent there?
Typically, we're doing it ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah, we're typically having those conversations, AJ, before the investor even closes on the property.
Right.
So, I think that's an important aspect of just besides doing a physical inspection and looking at it. I think, having some people who are good at the visual side, the down the road I can sell it and get the maximum return. I think those people are hard to come by, but I think they're worth having, around, and I think we're really good at that. So, and it doesn't matter the price point. It's, like I was mentioning, there's a significant difference between Compton and Silver Lake, but I think most people on the webinar understand that as well.
Right.
It's just no fun when you're trying to sell a property and you either can't get the price, or maybe the reason you're not getting the price is because it's missing something. And those are tough conversations that any listing agent doesn't want to have with a seller. So to me, it's just better to have those conversations at the very beginning and do the what-if scenarios, and then have everybody on the same page of what those expectations are, and just get the best possible outcome and make some money, because it's to be had out there. There's lots of opportunity. Are you there?
Oh, Brandon, are you still there? I think my audio cut out for a second.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, sorry about that, man. My audio cut out there, which was strange. Technology is supposed to make your life easier.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up, guys, to a point now where we're almost just about the hour mark of our webinar, and I appreciate so much for those of you guys that have stayed on and listened to what Brandon's had to share. Um, Brandon, if these guys need to reach you, which I highly, highly, highly suggest they do, how do they get a hold of you and your team?
First of all, if they want to check us out, they can go to teamechorealestate.com. So it's TeamechoRealestate.com, teamechorealestate.com. My cell phone number is 310-343-1404. Again, that's 310-343-1404. We'd love to help whoever we can. We have a full-time acquisition department, so we're constantly sourcing opportunities to buy, and obviously we've got a great background on the construction side and the design side, and we have a great open house team and listing team. So we're pretty well rounded. If we could help anybody, even if they needed a second opinion, have them reach out to us and see what we can do to help each other.
No, I think it's really crucial, and if it counts for anything, guys, again, like I said, I've been on a panel with this guy. I've had the opportunity to listen to him and learn from him and the things he said on a panel, and I've spoken with many, 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 many agents. We speak to 30 to 40 agents a month. Brandon and his team really do know what they're talking about. It's extremely refreshing, Brandon, to hear you guys break down your procedure, and I think it goes back to even just somebody in the audience that brought up a property that they were looking at in Pasadena, and within 10 seconds, completely knowing nothing about that transaction, you broke down and defined the individual's property to them, and that was so cool to see, because it's great to really speak to somebody who understands the market as a career and not just something like you mentioned earlier they're popping into and popping out of. So, guys, for questions on how to break down, or interview an agent, please reach out to us or contact Brandon and his team and chat with them about your project. Maybe have them look at it, and you can try to interview them, and I'm sure they'll be interviewing you too, as I'm sure you guys do. And Brandon, I can't thank you enough for taking the time today to share with us and our audience, man. Thank you very much.
And AJ, I appreciate you having me, and as always, you're very resourceful and helpful. I hope the people out there appreciate it, and I'm sure they do. And anything I can do to help you and your team, and vice versa. Look forward to the future with you guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Join us again next week for our webinar Wednesdays. And for those of you that noticed, I apologize. We didn't really come on and broadcast that we were going to skip last Wednesday. So sorry about that for those of you that logged on. But we wish all of you guys who were unable to attend for the religious holiday a very happy holiday. And we appreciate you guys being steadfast with us. So we'll look forward to chiming in